Food Network spent 30 years building some of the most recognizable faces in television. These weren't just cooking show hosts. They were household names, people you invited into your kitchen every week, whose voices became part of your daily routine. And then, one by one, they vanished. Some left quietly. Some were pushed out. Some disappeared under circumstances that were anything but quiet. The reasons behind each exit are far more interesting than any official statement ever let on. She was there before the network even knew what it wanted to be. Sarah Moulton was one of Food Network's very first stars, and her story tells you almost everything about how the network changed over time. When Food Network launched in 1993, it was built around a simple idea: serious, educational cooking hosted by people who actually knew what they were doing. Moulton had trained under Julia Child, and she brought that same calm, knowledgeable authority to her shows. She wasn't performing. She was teaching. But here's where it gets interesting. The network started watching its ratings. It noticed loud personalities, drama-filled competitions, and shows that felt more like reality TV than cooking class. Slowly, Moulton's thoughtful, technique-focused style became less central to what Food Network wanted to be. By 2007, the network had moved on from her format before she even made a formal exit. But what happened next is the part most people miss. Moulton didn't disappear. She moved to PBS, became a regular voice on Milk Street Radio, and kept writing cookbooks. It turned out she didn't need Food Network. Food Network needed her more than she needed it. Then there's a story that unfolded faster than almost anyone could process. Paula Deen was one of Food Network's biggest stars through the early 2000s. Multiple shows, a restaurant empire, a cookware line, and a fan base that was genuinely devoted. And then in 2013, it all came apart in roughly 48 hours. A former employee filed a lawsuit claiming a deeply problematic work environment. During a legal deposition, Deen admitted to having used racial slurs in the past. Food Network announced it would not renew her contract. Sponsors dropped her within days. The collapse was shocking even by the standards of celebrity controversies. But what came after? Nobody expected that either. Her restaurants kept operating. She produced a syndicated show, appeared on Dancing with the Stars, launched a podcast, a YouTube channel, a pet food line, and kept writing cookbooks at a pace most authors would find impossible. By the time her cookbook count reached 18, total sales had passed 11 million copies. The Food Network chapter closed in the most damaging way possible. Everything she'd built around it kept moving. Whether that's resilience or simply a brand too large to fully collapse, that's a question worth sitting with. Bobby Flay is one of the most decorated chefs in Food Network history. Iron Chef America, Beat Bobby Flay, Boy Meets Grill, Throwdown. His name was woven into the network's identity for nearly 3 decades. And then in 2021, contract negotiations broke down. Flay had reportedly been seeking a significantly larger deal, and the two sides couldn't reach an agreement. But here's what that departure actually revealed. Flay was arguably the network's most bankable talent. Long before any of them, there was Emeril. Emeril Lagasse was the chef who turned Food Network from a niche cable channel into a cultural phenomenon. Before Emeril Live launched in 1997, the network was still finding its footing. After it launched, they had something they'd never quite had before, a genuine star who could generate the kind of energy usually reserved for entertainment, not cooking. His catchphrases entered American pop culture. His brand became a genuine empire. And then, by the late 2000s, the relationship quietly cooled. The network reduced his programming schedule. Emeril Live ended in 2010 after more than 800 episodes, described publicly as a mutual decision, which is the standard language used when neither side wants to explain what actually happened. What his departure illustrated was a pattern that would repeat again and again. Food Network was extraordinarily good at making stars, and considerably less good at keeping them once those stars had grown large enough to have options elsewhere. Emeril made Food Network. And then Food Network became less essential to Emeril. Paul Hollywood arrived with enormous name recognition from the Great British Bake Off, and Food Network brought him to American audiences through Paul Hollywood's City Bakes. The show was well made and genuinely informative. But it didn't connect. The audience that loved him on Bake Off wasn't necessarily the same audience watching Food Network, and the show couldn't bridge that gap. Food Network didn't continue it beyond the initial run. Hollywood returned his full focus to Bake Off, where he's remained central to one of the most watched baking programs in television history. He didn't leave under difficult circumstances. He simply didn't translate the way the network had hoped. That's not a failure. It's just an honest outcome. Ellie Krieger built her career on a premise that was genuinely useful, that food could be healthy and still taste good. Her show Healthy Appetite developed a loyal following among viewers who wanted exactly that combination. But the network's direction was moving the other way. As Food Network leaned harder into indulgent, big personality content and competition formats, a show built around making healthier choices became progressively less central to the brand. Her show ended in 2009. But what quietly followed is worth noting. Krieger continued writing, publishing, and contributing to food media long after leaving. The audience she built through Food Network followed her out. Her departure fits a specific pattern in the network's history. The chefs whose work was most educational or technique-focused tended to be the ones edged out as entertainment value overtook instruction. The network that launched with Julia Child's educational model eventually built its identity on something completely different, and the hosts who embodied that original vision had to find other places to do what they'd always done. Ming Tsai hosted East Meets West starting in 1998, a genuine fusion cooking show reflecting his background in both French and Chinese culinary traditions. He won a Daytime Emmy for it. He also won a James Beard Award, which is about as serious a culinary credential as exists in American food culture. The show ran until 2003. Tsai has said the network's evolving direction simply wasn't a natural fit for the sophisticated, technique-heavy content he was producing. And what he did next proved something important. He moved to PBS and hosted Simply Ming for an extended run that demonstrated exactly how loyal and real his audience was when given the right platform. PBS, with its educational mission, was a far better structural match for what Tsai was doing than a cable network increasingly organized around competition and spectacle. His career after Food Network proved the audience for serious cooking content was real. Food Network had just decided it wasn't the audience they wanted to prioritize anymore. Sandra Lee built her Food Network career on a concept called semi-homemade cooking, combining store-bought ingredients with fresh elements to create meals that looked impressive without requiring professional skill. Her show reached an enormous audience of home cooks who found her approach practical and genuinely useful. She connected with people who weren't trying to become professional chefs, but who still wanted to put good food on the table. That's a large and underserved audience, and she reached it effectively for years. But here's where her story takes a different turn than most. Her personal circumstances changed significantly. Her long-term relationship with Andrew Cuomo, who served as governor of New York, became a major part of her public profile, and as that relationship became entangled in political controversy, her media presence shifted accordingly. She's remained active through social media and cookbook publishing since stepping back from regular programming. But the consistent weekly presence she built on Food Network hasn't been replicated elsewhere in the same sustained way. Her story is a reminder that television careers are shaped by personal circumstances as much as professional ones. Mario Batali was one of Food Network's foundational figures. They're early, central to the network's credibility, with a combination of genuine expertise and outsized personality that made him one of the most distinctive presences the channel ever had. Molto Mario ran for years. He appeared on Iron Chef America. And then, in 2017, his world collapsed almost overnight. Multiple women came forward with detailed accounts of inappropriate behavior spanning years. Batali stepped away from his restaurant group, his media properties, and public life almost simultaneously. Food Network removed his content from its platforms. What followed was not a departure. It was something more permanent, driven entirely by circumstances of his own making, leaving a gap in the network's history that has simply been left unfilled. And then there's the one who may have said it most clearly on his way out. Alton Brown spent 20 years at Food Network and built something no one else quite replicated. Good Eats wasn't just a cooking show. It was a science and history show that happened to involve food, and it treated its audience as intelligent adults who could handle real information delivered in an entertaining way. 14 seasons. Some of the most genuinely educational cooking content ever made for American television. But what he said when he left is what everyone in the industry should have paid attention to. His contract expired in 2020 and wasn't renewed. He moved to Netflix to be part of the Iron Chef reboot there. And his explanation was unusually direct. He followed the franchise he loved to the platform willing to support it properly. Food Network had spent years resisting the creative evolution the production team was proposing. Netflix said yes immediately. He also produced his own content during the pandemic through YouTube, hosting low-budget shows that reached millions of loyal viewers with nothing but good ideas and a camera. Brown is still working, still producing, just doing it without needing Food Network's permission anymore, which may be exactly how he wanted it. So if Food Network spent 30 years building some of the most talented and knowledgeable cooking personalities in television, and then lost most of them one by one, what does that actually say? Was the network ever really in the business of supporting great chefs? Or was it always in the business of using them until something more profitable came along? The answer, if you look at every name on this list, has been staring at us the whole time.